What's going on, everybody? I'm Jay, the Reformed Puerto Rican dude. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Well, I don't even know how to begin this because tonight I have two guests with me, but all three of us are totally unprepared. So we're gonna be reacting to a couple of Voddie Baucham videos where he talks about youth group culture. Um, If you haven't watched the videos, I'm going to put them in the description below, but you probably know what they are. They're pretty well known. One of them is a little older, while another was more recent, but still it's not that recent actually. But the point is that he is not a fan overall of youth groups. And so hopefully what we can do tonight is that we can discuss what is a youth group in terms of a biblical standpoint. Is it biblical? And probably we'll talk about small groups in general as well. Like I said, guys, this is not a typical episode of Reform Rican. We're coming in totally unprepared. So with that said, I've got with me Sir Wilbur, Will Smith, not the black one, and chaplain / pastor Jake Korn. How are you guys doing?
Very good.
What up?
You guys feeling ready for this one?
I don't know why you keep saying we're unprepared. I am completely prepared.
Jake's got it.
I am prepared in season and out of season.
That's what I'm just saying what I was told. When we were talking before we started recording this episode, Will kept saying that he's unprepared, and Jake, you did not say a word.
Okay. So you lump me in with him. That's on you.
Well, you know what? That's fine. You know what? Let's just go to the video, guys. Let's go ahead and watch this video, and then we'll talk about it.
Done a lot of youth events over the year, some significant youth events over the years, and was really known in those circles rather, as one of the go-to guys for events that related specifically to young people. And although it's never been the majority of my schedule, there had always been 10 or 15% of my itinerant schedule that incorporated these significant youth events. So I've been there, and most of the things that I was doing were things that involved the most significant, the largest, the most well-respected youth ministries in local churches, and also parachurch youth ministries in the country. Being at these events was like casting pearls before swine. These events looked the same. They sounded the same. These youth pastors were just sort of reincarnations of the same guy. The events themselves were sort of reincarnations of one another, always trying to outdo one another. And it was wholly ineffective. The fruit that was born in these ministries and through these events was negligible. In fact, success in these youth ministries was always determined the same way. The successful person coming through the youth ministry usually went on to become a youth minister. The people who were most committed to the youth ministry were the ones who became, workers in their college ministry or workers in their youth ministry or youth pastors themselves. There was no sense of a broader, bigger picture of preparing young people for full-orbed adult Christian life and experience. That's why youth ministry is not the term anymore. Now it's student ministry. That's the term nowadays. The terminology has changed, sort of like global warming changed into climate change, So now what's happened was youth or teenagers were growing up beyond their high school years and falling out of church because they were never part of the church as a whole. They were always part of a subculture within the church. So what do we need to do? Well, since we've created a philosophy of ministry, since we've created an ecclesiology that looks completely different than the church as a whole, what we have to do in order to retain these people longer is to incorporate them into a college ministry and a singles ministry. So now the youth pastor is no longer the youth pastor. He's the student minister, because the ministry now incorporates people all the way from their early teen years through their mid-20s and sometimes even beyond. So again, the fruit of this is just a self-perpetuation of this cottage industry of subculture ministry.
All right. So the last 30 seconds there or so, we lost Jake, who was the one person that was prepared for for this video reaction. But I'm gonna try to reach out to him, and while I do, Will, why don't you give me some of your thoughts as to what Bodhi's saying? Do you agree with him? Do you disagree with him? Oh, hang on. We actually got Jake back on. Hey, Jake. Do you know what happened?
Yeah. Voddie turned into a robot, and then time stopped altogether.
Okay. I don't know. But you've watched this video before, right?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, cool. So I was just asking Will. I was like, listen, Will, since the one guy that was prepared for this video is now gone. No, but what do you guys think? Like, do you agree with Voddie on the whole, youth group thing? Is he taking it too far? What are you guys' thoughts on this?
You want me to go first again?
Yeah. Yeah.
Go for it.
All right. Well, I think from other videos I've seen from Voddie, I don't necessarily want to go to the extreme that he goes, but I definitely agree with him in principle on the subject. And I think talking about these big youth rallies and these big youth events, and it's just kind of typical of our culture these days, which is more about getting a fix than it is about actually making disciples or something that would actually be truly of value. So I wouldn't say there's no place for age-segregated meetings or events or something like that. I mean, I think it's great for the teens to go and do something together. I think it's great for the little kids to do stuff together. I think it's fine if you have a Golden Oldies or Super Seniors or some group like that want to go to the Grand Canyon together. I mean, I think he just makes it sound like you can't do any of that, and it's not biblical. And I agree that there's not any necessarily scriptural support for that, but and I definitely don't think we need to feel like we have to incorporate those things. I think less segregation is generally better, but I wouldn't completely rule out all of those things.
Okay. Jake, any thoughts?
So I got my start in professional paid ministry as a youth pastor. And I have to admit, I agree with him as far as the results, that youth ministry becomes a self-perpetuating momentum beast. And when the consumer-based model of churches becomes such that parents are shopping churches based on whether or not their kids like the youth group, that's kind of when you can tell that the concept of it, just writ large in the American, church, at least, the concept of it, I think he's got a point that it has gone too far. In that, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, that youth groups, no matter how well intended they are conceptualized and even executed, what I think they've always become, not always, but largely become, are a place where parents offset their own discipleship responsibilities, and a place where the older people in the church offset their own discipleship responsibilities, right? So I really was convicted studying Titus when Paul says, older women teach the younger women, right? So that they will love their husbands and their children, whatever that line is. Let me read it. Older women likewise are to be reverent in their behavior, not malicious gossips, nor enslaved to much wine, teaching what is good, so that they may encourage the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, right? So this idea that we're going to hire a slightly older person to be in charge of the young people so that we don't have to, is what I've seen happen in churches. And I'm not saying that any youth pastor sets out to be that, but that quickly becomes like the marker of success, right? In the same way that a struggling pastor with 50 people in his church looks at the 2,000 person church down the road and thinks that's the measure of success. So, we can't offset what true discipleship looks like, but I'm with Will, right? If we're allowed to have softball teams, a Christian softball team, because that's a bunch of people who are Christian and like softball, as long as that's not supplanting what is vital, as long as it's an addition to what is vital, we should have it.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking here. So you guys both acknowledge, and I'm gonna play devil's advocate. I actually don't want to. I'm probably gonna give it away anyway. I'm gonna give away what my position is on this whole thing, but I don't want to. But I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a second. So you guys both admit there's a problem, right? And Voddie's rightfully pointing out, hey, there's this whole culture where we're just depending on the youth pastor to disciple our children. You guys would both agree with that, correct?
Yeah, that's the problem.
Okay. So if that's the case, then what is the solution, you guys think?
Well, I would just like to point out too, like Jake, I got my start in professional ministry as a youth pastor myself too. So I did that for 7 years until I realized that I felt like I was supplanting fathers in their role. And there were other issues there as well. But I think the last time I was on your program with Jake, I think I said that the same solution is still the solution. It's to preach the word, it's to teach the word. And obviously there are specific steps that we need to take to disciple and pour our lives into the next generation. And that doesn't really matter whether we're 50 or whether we're 30 or whether we're 70. I think we need to be working across those age ranges, age groups, and be sharing life and ministering together with the other members of our congregation.
Jake?
Yeah, I think that it is the strategy of how we execute and limit youth events. They should not even closely resemble church events. So many youth events have worship at the beginning and then announcements and then a message, and a Wednesday night youth event just turns into a mini church. And it shouldn't emulate the Sunday morning, the Lord's Day experience. It should be strategically something different. So whether it is just a direct study where, we get together and all we're doing is studying the word, or it's strictly social. Like, I don't think anybody would argue that it's good for our teenagers to socialize because they have an affinity for Christ together. But the goal can't be, let's get more kids. The goal should be, let's equip families to have better discipleship in their homes. This is a vitamin. This is not a meal. And that was very important to me when I did youth ministry, was to say, look, this is something that should be the smallest portion of what is happening in the home. Now, if a kid's got a broken home or something like that, we can address that differently. But we don't address that by looking to the youth pastor to be the super discipler, but rather we grab an older man in the church who's got some wisdom and got some time on his hands, who can then disciple that young man from the broken home or whatever. So, it's a youth ministry or a seniors ministry should be connective tissue between the vital organs of the church. It should never be considered a main event. But what Voddie is talking about is when a youth event becomes a main event, and then that's successful, so it spurs the need for a larger main event, and then that becomes successful, and so we need to duplicate that, and it grows in and of itself and creates a whole new industry. No, it needs to be, this church has this need, and so we are going to modestly fill that need, pointing toward the thing that matters, which is the proclamation of the gospel. Okay,
that's good. You said something, Jake, and both of you guys could probably respond to this. You said, I don't want to, I don't remember exactly how you said it, but you said something along the lines of, I don't want to hinder youth coming together who have an affinity for Christ. How does that work when you have so many youth groups? And again, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm not necessarily agreeing with what my question kind of may sound like I'm saying, but bear with me for a second. How do you deal with the fact that so many youth groups don't work as simply a group of kids that have an affinity for Christ, but rather it's something to do. You know what I mean? Like and this I will admit I've seen youth groups where kids just go because hey, they've got, a cool band,
Sure.
or my friend goes there and we go smoke pot afterwards. You know what I mean? Like, and
Sure.
so it just seems like there are youth group events um where people are just going because they'd rather do that than, you know it's kind of like well, I'm kind of going to church,
Sure.
and I'm good there, but really I'm just going to hang out and be entertained and that kind of thing. So wouldn't you say that that's a problem, and that we're kind of enabling that by having a youth group?
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's symptomatic of the bigger problem, which is the modern trend where we go to church or whatever thing to get our fix, and it's all about us and how it makes us feel. And like Jake was saying, we shop churches based on how all their youth department is, or what kind of nursery facilities they have, or it's all about us. It's all what's the word I'm looking for? The consumer is
Based,
it's all about me. And I mean, I'm all cool with God and everything, and I'm going to praise and worship a little bit, but it's that consumerism, that seeker sensitive, go to get something from me, and we're just applying it to a different facet of the church at this point, with the youth group, and that's what. Not all youth groups are like that, and I don't think any of us would say that, but I think that tends to be the trend. The music, the events, it's all cool, and you get the bait and switch. Sometimes that's one of my favorite youth department things, where we we're going to have pizza party, but then we're going to give you the gospel at the end, like, because we got to get that hook in there. And there's a lot of problems with a lot of those things. And again, I don't think that it makes it all wrong across the board. And I think there is a way to do those things that are God honoring and faithful to the scripture without that.
Yeah, I think there's a huge. I like what you said about the bait and switch. I think here's the deal: is that this is where Calvinism is tested, is in those teenage years, right? Because you might have your kid who was like on board and compliant when they were in Awanas or whatever, right? But now that they're getting the teenage years and they're a little bit more rebellious, now we're not so sure about their salvation that we were kind of sure about at 8 or 9. So now we really want to make sure that we sink it in. So we're unsure what to do with a youth group. Is this a sheep pasture where we feed sheep food, or do we stop being Calvinist for a minute and we hope to turn goats into sheep here? And so we're going to throw out some goat food. And so it just becomes this irrecognizable mishmash of strategy. Is this an evangelism event where we're going to the lost and giving the lost the gospel, or is this an event for sheep where we need to give them sheep food, which in this instance would be direct discipleship, confession of sin, deep study of the word? None of those things are going to be attractive to those who maybe aren't goats, but they're sheep who have yet to be called back into the pasture, right? They are the elect who are not yet justified. And so our Ordo Salutis, our belief in God's ability to save, gets really dicey in those teenage years, man. And I've seen it in parents time and time again, where they want to be like it's more about the parents' anxiety of wanting to see their teenager get saved, but they'll couch it under, well, we're going to reach those other lost kids. Well, if you want me to reach those other lost kids, then I need to be evangelizing and not treating your kid differently. And so it's a huge mess. And so again, limit it to it as a church event. If it's just for kids, to be just for the kids who are, whatever your tradition is, who are catechized and baptized, right? Like those who are interested in actually developing discipleship for Christ. And in a youth group of 100 kids, that might be 10 kids. And then have a separate thing that is some kind of evangelism event, but clarify what it is you're doing and stop running the success off of the numbers of everybody who's in your sanctuary. right? And so this becomes a problem where the newly reformed world is kind of, they're not over some of their Arminian ways as far as how they think people get saved. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You said something now, and you kind of were, I feel like you were reading my mind a little bit. So are you suggesting that maybe youth events shouldn't be so open to whoever wants to come?
Correct.
To be
No.
very blunt. Okay.
No, that doesn't
Okay.
exist in the Bible. That doesn't exist. There's nothing like that.
Right, but there's no such thing as youth groups either. So how do you make that work?
No. I'm sorry. What I mean is the church, the function of the assembly is for the church.
Correct. No, I agree with that.
And so when you need to reach the world, you go out to the world to reach the world.
So would you say that on Sunday, if somebody shows up to church, would you say, no, I'm sorry, sir, you can't come in because this is just for the church?
Don't fence their attendance, but don't change your activity to meet their expectations.
Okay. All right.
Right?
So I just want to be clear.
So if my youth group is based around confession, discipleship, and deep study of the word, I'm not going to change that when a new kid walks in the door.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're not necessarily saying then that, hey, no, we're not welcoming other kids. We're just simply gonna keep this a certain way, and it's not going to change.
If he's a sheep, he's going to love the sheep food. If he's not, then we need to take him out for ice cream and have long discussions about how he actually is a sinner.
Okay.
That's good. What I mean?
Yeah.
And something that Jake's mentioned earlier is, sometimes it's okay to just have fun.
Agreed.
Just have a social. That's what we typically do once a month or something, is we just, play games, or, sometimes the kids just come over to the house and just hang out. We don't have anything structured. Just let them do what they want, or, that anybody's welcome to that. But when we get together Wednesday nights, it's pretty deep discussion. And then, I push them and expect a lot of them. And you don't get the kids clamoring to bring their friends and that want to just come and hang out for that Wednesday night meeting. And I think that's what Jake's getting at.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm trying to push. I said I was gonna, put my cards on the table at some point, so I might as well just say I think I'm pretty much on the same page with you guys. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm completely against youth groups. I think we have to set certain boundaries in terms of how they are done. And I see the youth group culture now as just like most of the, no offense, Will, non-denominational churches, that it's just kind of like a seeker-sensitive movement. And that's not to say that all non-denominationals are like that, but when you have a seeker-sensitive church, it's usually a non-denominational church. So no offense, Will.
None taken.
All right, cool. All right, guys. So what about, well, actually, you know what? Let me ask you guys this. So, Will, you brought up fun. So where do we draw the line on fun in terms of when are we making it just about having fun, at least as much as taking it seriously on Wednesday nights? And how do we address that when we start noticing that there's more kids showing up to these kind of fun events who maybe are not the best influence to the kids who are actually in the church, who you are actually trying to disciple, while at the same time not necessarily completely shutting them out? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, kind of. I think I think fun is a good thing. I think fun is a gift from God. I think, Jake mentioned a church softball team or something. We do events like this, and a lot of times we try to sanctify them by, having a 5-minute devotion at the end, or having a closing word of prayer. We just got to somehow sanctify that, which fun for the elect is sanctified. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we have to be always, let's slip in a Bible verse here to make sure we got our God covered, or let's enjoy each other's company. That's fellowship of the saints. Mm-hmm. And so there may be goats, or there may be some unsaved with us. That's okay. They can have fun too, and we can enjoy their company too. And I don't think I think we just fall into that trap of feeling like we've always got to church it up a little bit. And sometimes you just need to have fun, and especially teens. I mean, even adults, though, even we need to just get together and have fun sometimes. It's okay. It's a good thing. It's God honoring thing to just get together and have fun. And I think it's appropriate to get together and dig into a passage and discuss it and hear thoughts and challenge each other. And I think those things are great too.
Listen, Will, okay? Let's slow down with the fun thing a little bit. I'm a Baptist, okay? I just want to point that out there.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of this is a problem with our conceptualization of what a church is. Imagine the first century church. You didn't go pick a church you liked. The church you went to was the church that was in walking distance of everybody in your neighborhood who was Christian. Right? So the concept of going to pick a church is so foreign from the biblical context. What does that mean? Well, that means if the people in your neighborhood were doing something fun on a Tuesday, then you were there with the church doing that. But we've made the church an appointment activity where you have a scheduled meeting on Sunday, a scheduled meeting on Wednesday, and it is a thing that you go to, rather than we as the community of Christ who are all in walking distance with one another, we want to go crack up and do some fishing together or whatever, right? So like we've over formalized that. And so the solution, talking about seniors ministry, the church I worked at had a vibrant seniors ministry that was really great. It was adorable. They were so cute. They went on their little day trips or whatever with their fanny packs and their walkers, and they, in their tithe to the church, I say tithe, I don't believe in tithe, don't get me into that, but in their giving to the church, they would apportion a small section of their gift to go to that ministry. And here's the key. Their events were not planned by the church. That group planned their little events. They just collected a pocket of money together to do their little trips. But in youth, we think the church must be like a cruise director, and we must orchestrate and prepare these well-executed, fun activities with games and giveaway prizes and pizzas that we deliver. And we have to craft this experience for you. There's so much pressure on how to craft the perfect fun experience so kids want to come back. Well, that is a total misuse of the church's resources. Now, if your Wednesday night youth study group says afterwards, hey man, let's all go shoot some hoops and play, get some ice cream. And Johnny unsaved wants to come with us. Do you mind if he meets up with us? No, come on, let's go. Right? Or hey, let's get together Saturday afternoon. We're gonna be at the park throwing some frisbee. That's different than the church feeling this need to extremely precisely create and craft these experiences. And again, that's what Voddie's talking about, is now there's this whole industry around, can a youth pastor successfully create these events? And I did them, and they were stupid and had no ministry impact whatsoever. And here's where Voddie's right. Here's what they did. They helped me keep my job. They helped me show that I had value to the church because I had big events and I had numbers and I had baptized this many kids. And it just becomes this just Jenga game of nonsense where you're pulling from your firm foundation to stack this bricks on top until your foundation is all wobbly. Maybe it's not missing, but it's certainly wobbly because you have, conflated what the church should be doing. So church youth events should happen, but not in this like highly curated way. It should be a natural outflow of people who do life together. I hate that term, but really people who are living their lives together as Christian family.
Yeah. And I think you guys are on point when it comes to the whole idea of it being a community. I think nowadays, you have people, at least, for example, at my church, I have people from my church who are driving to church like an hour and a half from where they live.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's not like we can just, hey, what are you doing right now? Let's go hang out. We have set up a structure, and to be fair, we kind of need to. We have to formalize it in some way, shape, or form. But at the same time, I do agree that churches have to find a way. And honestly, when I say churches, I'm not talking about the leadership. I'm talking about just the people. Like they need to find a way to just organically act like the family that they are.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to your biological family, right? This is not necessarily always the case, but most people make a conceited effort, and it's just natural to just call them up and be like, "Hey, let's go hang out Saturday. I'll come over to your house, or you come over to mine, or we'll grill, or whatever it might be." Um, when it comes to church membership, like we can be friends, but we don't act like that. And it's so strange to me. So I thought it was really cool that, for example, the seniors at your church back then were just doing it on their own. I mean, that's fantastic.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with them, kind of utilizing church resources. Like I said, they set
Right.
aside a
Of
pot of
course.
money. That pot of money eventually bought them a little van. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, I don't. That's just a community doing community things,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
But that's the community of Christ doing community of Christ things together. Like my first thought when you said there are people from your church who live an hour and a half away, my thought as a pastor is, oh my gosh, what if I have to do a home visit? Like that sucks. Like that's so far away. And I'm not a strict Sabbatarian, but let me tell you something that I think is absolutely right. Right? That if you look at the Orthodox Jewish community, they have to walk to go to synagogue, which means, what does that mean? They have to live within a radius of that synagogue that they can walk to it. What does that mean? It means that entire community is extremely close, and they
Yep.
shop at the same places, and they go to each other's birthday parties, and they go to each other, mourn with one another and hold Shiva, right? Like there is something that I think is intrinsically wise about God's intention for what churches should look like. They absolutely should be community, and I'm talking physical community based, because of this idea of life together. Because if you're living an hour and a half away from the church because you love it for whatever reason, and there are probably many admirable things to love about that church, you have an appointment with that church once a week. You are not part of that life of that community.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I'm
and
not
it's
talking bad about
unfortunately
them. I'm sure they're awesome people who are doing it for
no.
awesome reasons, but it's just a symptom of the American church.
No, no, yeah, yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, there's different reasons, right? Like, in their case, they're doing it because this is the healthiest church, or a healthy
Sure,
church,
sure, sure, sure.
that they can find, as close as possible to them. It's actually funny because the one of the pastors used to live. So I live, for anybody watching that doesn't know, I live in, I'll just say Miami, Florida, to keep it simple. He used to live by Naples,
Mm.
which, if you know, well, you did
Twenty-three miles,
that
I think.
drive.
Isn't it?
You did that drive to come meet me when you were in
Yeah.
Naples. You can tell them it's about 2 hour drive.
Yeah.
And the pastor was driving 2 hours to church every week. And eventually, you know what he did? He moved.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, you kind of have to, because it's like you're saying, Jake, like, and I'm not trying to take over this episode, guys. I'm sorry, but
It's your show. I mean,
yeah, no, I know. But when I have you guys on, I want to hear from you guys. I talk enough as it is during my individual session. Anyway, so I'm just gonna say this. When it comes to churches, I absolutely agree that it has to be a community, and you can't do that if you're living, however far away. And so if you're having an issue where you cannot find a healthy church, move. And I know it's not that simple, but if you can, move. Because you shouldn't have to be so far away from the healthy, or a healthy church, that it's almost like a sacrifice. You know what I'm saying? It's like you're saying, maybe not walking distance. I mean, we live in the 21st century, but something more reasonable.
I think I
So
said the last episode, Jay, was, we hear about people moving to go to school or moving for a job. When's the last time you
yes,
heard somebody moved for a church?
correct.
And where should that be on our priority list?
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. I would say it's probably more important than a job or a school. So, all right. So I wanted to move the conversation along to now different age groups, and we kind of touched on it already because you brought up the seniors group, Jake. So we know what the issues are with youth group. What about, singles groups? What about, college and career? What about, seniors group? What do you guys think of those groups? Is that okay? Is it not okay? When is it okay? When is it not okay? Let's open up that conversation.
Well, I think, again, symptomatic of the problem is that we take our playbook from the world. We take our structure from our culture, and that the whole classrooms and grades and everything. I mean, it has a very humanistic, evolutionary almost origin, and just in the last couple hundred years or so. So I think we segregate by age, we segregate by our marital status. All of those things are reasons that we segregate our congregation. I think it's fine if a bunch of single guys want to go whitewater rafting or whatever. That's cool. Single guys and girls, for that matter. Maybe they'll meet each other or something, and get busy having families. But
hopefully,
yeah. I don't think there's anything intrinsically wrong with that. I think the problem is when we take our Sunday mornings and we don't see our children, and we don't see our aunt and uncle, and we don't see our mom or dad, and everybody goes their direction. You hit the church building, and this is just, I mean, goodness, guys, in my experience, I've seen this so much. Johnny goes here, Timmy goes there, Lisa goes here, Grandma goes in there, and it's like we're not even together at all.
Yeah.
And that is a crime. I mean, that is horrible. And we need to have community at least for Sunday morning. And again, if you want to have bingo on Tuesday nights, I'm all for it. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think it's just when it starts to seep into, and like Jake said, supplant or replace those foundational basic things, that we have a real problem.
Yeah, I just don't think the church should orchestrate those things. And I'm talking about the people who work at the church professionally. I just don't think they should orchestrate those. The church should orchestrate the things that the Bible says we should do, which, again, older women disciple the younger women. And I think we can extrapolate then older men disciple the younger men. That is a category that the Bible gives us. Therefore, the elders of the church should orchestrate those things. Now, supplementary to that, if as a vitamin to the feast that the church is providing, some singles want to meet Tuesday nights to watch Seinfeld or whatever they do. I don't know what young singles do anymore. Great. Again, that's just Christian community being Christian community. But what happens is we have allowed, I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but we have allowed the sheep to get so flippin' lazy, and they expect the professional ministry to do all of the things for them, to create these experiences. Like I said, to be cruise directors. We've got the bingo happening in the auditorium at 11, but don't miss the singles, hula hoop competition on the deck at 12, And it's like, that's not what I went to seminary for. That's not what my calling is about. Hey, church, you want to do social things? Socialize it up, bro. I'm here to do the things that a minister is called to do. When men talk about administration of the church, I think invariably it should always come back to talking about 1 Timothy 3 and Acts 6 and Titus 1. So I'm going to go back to Acts 6. In Acts 6, the elder said, it is not right that we should stop ministering the word to wait tables. So y'all go do that. Pick some dudes to figure that out, because we're going to do this. But we've created a pastor, which is a really shady use of the word when we talk about youth pastors. Some have like an ordination process and some don't. But a pastor whose job is not just to wait tables, but to create and craft these Disney, level entertainment experiences on top of that. So like if the sheep want to go socialize, bro, socialize. But stop looking to your pastors to do that for you. Stop waiting for them to have a robust small group ministry. That's not our job as professional ministry. It is not our job. And I know John Piper said, brothers, we are not professionals. But as people who get paid to do these things, my time is better spent in the administration of the word.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Means of grace, absolutely administered by the pastors and, the fathers in the home, which is the other problem with.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry, but yeah. So it should go right. If I'm building a church, it's going to start with elders proclaiming the word from the pulpit. Next is supporting family ministry in the home, and then the next level is the discipleship that happens across generations. That's not familial, right? Those are the layers of importance that I would do. But family, we haven't talked about family discipleship, right? But like equipping people to do family discipleship is the second most vital thing a church does after proclamation of the gospel during the act of preaching.
Yep, absolutely. I wanted to touch on that. I'm going to put that on pause for just a second. So I'm thinking about this, right? Where we see this pattern in the scriptures where the older men should be teaching or guiding the younger men, older women, the younger women. How do we do that? I mean, when we focus so much on age segregated groups or, you know, uh, the stage of life, right? Like singles or whatever it might be. How do we encourage, right? Because we already said like, hey, the pastor's job is to administer the word, right? And so we want these things to happen organically. But um, how do we encourage an environment where churchgoers will mix according to, or not according to, but regardless of age, and do what the scriptures say in terms of being discipled, right? I do believe that older men should be discipling younger men, for example. I absolutely believe that older women should be teaching younger women, how to care for the home, how to be a good wife, whether they're a wife yet or not, right? That's hopefully what they're going to be one day. Um, so should we encourage groups where where we mix age? I mean, what do you guys think? Like, what do we do about that? Because if it's not happening, what do you do?
We hire somebody to come in and make a program.
There it is.
I want to add to the role of the elders is to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry, not to do the work of the ministry, but to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. So, sorry, go ahead, Jake. You were going
so how do you make this happen? You communicate from a person's entire experience of your church from start to finish that this is the identity of the church. This is what we do. If you're a part of this church, this is what we do. So you preach on it from the front, you teach on it in class, you model it in your own life, and then when the stubborn sheep aren't wanting to make it happen, you help with some kind of resourcing. So this is something we actually did at my time at the church. We made one-on-one discipling relationships between somebody a little bit more advanced and somebody a little bit younger, right? A milk and meat situation. We formalize that as saying, this is who we are, even to the point that we were considering making it part of the membership conversation, which is a different conversation. But if you have a covenantal membership, situation with your church, that should be part of it. To be a covenanted member of this church, you will agree that you are in a discipleship relationship, either up or down. So we preached on it from the front. We taught it in Bible study situations. We modeled it personally. And then we would have like these, like, I hate to call them it, but socials where we would say, hey, if you don't have a discipleship partner yet, we need you to get one. And so if you're having a hard time meeting people who are in a different phase of life than you, we're just going to have a night where you get together, just older ladies, younger ladies, just chat, see if something happens organically. We're not going to do a sign-up sheet quite yet, but if none of you do this, we'll get to a sign-up sheet because it's that important. But it has to be something that is like consistently reinforced as the identity of who we are. And it should be the identity of who we are because it's in a direct instruction from Paul that that's what we should be doing.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's sad that it sometimes has to get to that point. Because you would think regenerate believers who walk according to the word would be seeking out to do these things without the church essentially having to force it on them. But unfortunately, that's the world we live in sometimes.
And also like tell stories and celebrate successes of where this works.
Mhm.
And that those really help when an older guy and a younger guy, they catch breakfast every Thursday morning at 6 a.m. and have these deep conversations. Like, invite them to the front and let them talk about that experience and show not just the pastors talking about it, but two real people talking about like what the benefit has been for them. When we taught about it, because a lot of it is the pushback of, well, I wouldn't know what to do in that situation, and I don't really know my Bible that well. And okay, great. These are things that we can equip you with. We can teach you, right? How to study the word together, how to relate your experience through a biblical worldview or whatever. Like, don't waste your time on other things like making programs. Spend your time equipping the saints in a strategic way, like toward this thing. So we found when we celebrated these successes from the front, and when we made these discipleship relationships seem like the attractive thing that they are, people wanted to do them. And I mean, there was a real season of like major turnaround in the church as these things were starting to light on fire. Like it was really great to see.
Yeah, that's excellent. So, I'm sorry. Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I have had such a varied pile of experiences with different churches throughout my life, from the Monday nights door-to-door visitation, Tuesday nights as teenagers, Wednesday nights as prayer group, Thursday nights as Awana, Friday, where it's like something going on every night, and only the really spiritual are there all the time, to not having so many programs. And I just, for the last 10 or 15 years, have been in this church that actually just kind of does things the way the Bible says, and these relationships just happen, and leadership is trained up, and there's consistent teaching, and these things. It's hard to go back to when you had to think about how to program that to happen when you've had a healthy, vibrant church for a decade or better.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think we just have to be careful where things can get out of hand real quick. And if we're not constantly, for lack of a better term, reforming back to the scriptures, that's where things start turning into something that it's no longer what it was supposed to be, right? And so, kind of bringing all this back to Voddie's point, where he's essentially making the argument like, hey, we shouldn't be having these groups. Yeah, I don't know if we shouldn't be having them at all. We should just be doing them biblically, right?
Yeah.
And
And
not
naturally.
prioritizing them. Naturally, absolutely.
I mean, organically, right? Like not
Yeah.
not programmatically is what I'm saying.
Right. Like it's kind of like what we've been talking about. Like the pastors shouldn't have to constantly be overseeing all of these little, subgroups and ministries of sorts. Like, equip the saints to handle these things and let them handle it, right? But yeah, I mean, I think pastors do kind of have to oversee to some extent, just to make sure, like, hey, nothing unbiblical is going on in here, right? but generally speaking, it should be a hands-off, natural thing that's going on there. So with that said, let's talk about the family, right? And I think that we've already kind of addressed it, but I think that whether it's Reformed churches, whether it's, whatever it might be, one of the biggest things that happens now is you will see such an emphasis on, well, the youth group need to be with the youth, the elderly need to be with the elderly, and okay, we'll do some discipling with an older man and a younger man, or an older woman, younger woman. But I honestly believe that we are failing on teaching families how to do things like family worship. So maybe you guys disagree with me. I'm pretty sure you don't, but maybe you do. So if you disagree with me, let me know. But if you don't, then what are we supposed to do as a church, or what should we be doing as a church in order to encourage families to act like families and worship as families. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not just worshiping with the youth, and the elders with the elders. You get what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
That's the problem why we have youth groups. I mean, that Voddie talked about that in that other video about how, and Jake mentioned it too, picking up the slack that's created by the abdication of fathers from their roles and the abdication of mothers from their roles. And, you've got to preach the word, and you've got to tell fathers what their responsibilities are. I mean, that's why we preach expository, exegetical messages, because we consider the whole counsel of God in those things. And I mean, the home is that most vital place where those children and those adults are growing. And so we need to encourage the fathers to be fathers at home and not to pass that responsibility to a hippie.
I think the answer is church membership and catechism.
Yeah.
We don't catechize our children, and we don't have their fully realized catechesis be part of their official membership as members of the church. And we've lost the concept of, because that has to be taught in the home. If you want a consistent catechesis, it has to be done in the home. And so the parents have to know enough to be able to relay that information. But instead, we just became so seeker sensitive that, well, we don't want to bar people from being a part of this church. And, their grandmother and their parents are part of this church. So we couldn't not make if the child doesn't do it. And we just kind of like backslide on any sort of intellectual rigor on the part of the family to teach the children, just the basics of the faith. And that's a parental responsibility. And so again, we've just given all of that to the pastor. And this is just like, this is a Great Awakening problem, right? This is a Billy Graham problem. The idea of this great sensational preacher to be the one to deliver the once for all gospel. And that's all that's needed is that once for all walk down the aisle. Everybody just wants that experience to be one and done. And then everything else is supplementary to that. And so the life of Christian character doesn't rate anymore for churches. And so then that definitely isn't going to trickle down to the next generation. And so, yeah, pastor, you do it. You got it. Yeah, youth pastor, or yeah, children's director, yeah, nursery director. Let them color Noah's Ark in crayon, and they didn't learn anything other than they colored a rainbow. But yeah, you got it. That's it. It's done. And there's no catechism happening. And so, of course, these children are going to get to college and be completely empty-headed in front of their professors because they don't know what the chief end of man is. They don't know what God is. They don't know how to defend the Trinity, right? Because we are only giving out spiritual milk. That's American church writ large, are only giving out spiritual milk, and we're mixing it with goat food and then expecting them to be biblically fed sheep.
All right. That's an inside joke. If you're watching, you don't know what we're talking about.
Hit me up on Facebook. I'll explain it to you.
Bonus points there, Jake.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, you brought up college, and I'm thinking about when I took my intro to logic class, and I was like a brand new Christian. I don't even know if I was a brand new Christian. Maybe I wasn't even born again, or maybe I was. I don't know. But I had kind of grown up in church a little bit. My history is a little bit wonky, but I kind of considered myself some kind of a Christian. And I remember like the professor, he was just going off against Christianity, and man, I didn't know what to say. Like, I just kept my head down, and it's true, man. I just wasn't catechized. Like, I didn't know what to do. Like, I'll never forget when he asked, can God make a rock so big and heavy that not even he can lift it, right? If he can't, then he's not all powerful. And if he can, then what's the other way around? Like, if he can, then he's creating something that's like more powerful than himself or something like that.
He's not all powerful either way.
Yeah. Right, exactly. It's like, you're in a conundrum. And obviously now I know, but like, that's the thing. I'm teaching my kids, especially my oldest one, like, I'll have conversations with him. He knows that I go out evangelizing, and he doesn't want to go with me. So I'm like, you're going to have to go eventually. You're getting older. You need to see what this looks like. That's another thing. Parents are afraid of putting their children in those kinds of situations. They kind of want to overprotect them. You have to expose them early in an environment that you can control, so that you can explain to, have like a debrief afterwards, right? Like, so right now, I mean, I'm giving him a break, right? Like, he's 6, so he's still very young. But I do tell him, eventually you're gonna have to go with me. You need to see what it's like. And that, for the time being, I tell him a lot of the objections that people tell me, like, hey, in this part of the Bible it says that Jesus is the Son of God and not God. Like, would you answer that? Or, is God all powerful? Can he make whatever he wants? Can he do whatever he wants? No, my son is learning how to answer these things, and he's 6 years old. And that's what I'm going to teach my youngest ones too, so that when they get to things like 18, 19 years old, and or working or studying or whatever with other people who hold a different worldview, they know that they know how to defend theirs. Excuse me. They know how to defend theirs, and they are not easily deceived.
Well, and you make a good point about it being about worldview. So, are you providing the lens that your kids see the world in through that picture? So recently, my parents watched my kids when me and my wife went out on a date, and my parents, they're not as hip as I am, so they put on Disney's Lightyear, the movie for the kids, and there's a same-sex couple in it, and so my daughter asked me about it the next day, and I said, okay, well, let's talk about what you saw through the lens of the Bible. What does the Bible say about that? And then we walk through Genesis, and Deuteronomy 6 gives us that answer, right? When it gives the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. It says, these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. That's all of the times. All of the times you should be talking to your kids about these things. So whatever experience your kids are going through, are you filtering that experience through the lens of the Bible? Someone was mean to them at school, filter that through the lens of the Bible. You're at the stop sign and you see somebody panhandling, filter that through the lens of the Bible, and have that, right? And this is what I tell parents. I'm not saying you guys don't know this, right? But this is how I equip a dad who's just kind of, well-meaning but nominally Christian, who says, I'm not equipped to do this. Okay, well, one, equip yourself, read the Bible. That's on you. I can't do that for you. And then here's how you do it. Use that Bible that you just read as the filter. And, it's again, this is going to sound harsh, right? But if you only feed sheep food, only the sheep are going to be full. So if the goats don't like it, okay, move it on. I don't know what to tell you. I don't have goat food here. Like, a church should be about the business of giving sheep food. That's what a church is for. That's what it does.
Amen. Absolutely. Will, anything else?
About this question, or just in general?
Just in general. I want to make sure that I get you, because me and Jake have been talking for a while. I wasn't sure if you wanted to say something.
Yeah, and I've had Jake did an excellent job at handling this. I mean, equipping our fathers and mothers, and are you opening the Word every day with your kids? Those things are just essential. And obviously, I don't know that anybody does that perfectly, but that's what we need to be about as parents. Just one thought. I don't know if you're trying to wrap up here, but if you are a youth pastor, if you are in that position, use that to show young men, young women, what a grown man is supposed to be, not to show them that you can still be a boy.
Oh, amen. Come on now.
Yeah, that's one thing that I wanted to make sure I got in here tonight.
Preach on that.
That's another huge issue with that youth culture, youth ministry culture, is let me just show the kids that I can still be cool. I can still be with them. I can still hang out and get to their level. And that's how they think they're accomplishing something. And they are accomplishing something. It's just not what they probably intend to accomplish if they love the Lord. And let's make boys into men. Let's make girls into women. And let's show them what a man looks like.
Yeah. If I can have a final word, I want to also give some advice.
Go.
If you are a youth pastor, My advice to you is that your flock is not just the youth. Your flock is that whole family. Your job is not to be the hero. Your job is to pass the ball to that father or mother, or find a surrogate Christian father or mother, so that family can score that touchdown together. You should be the least important person in that equation. So spend as much time strategizing how you're going to reach parents as you do kids, and then you might be useful in ministry.
Yep, absolutely. That's great, guys. So to wrap it up, I guess I would say nothing necessarily or inherently wrong with age-based groups. Nothing inherently wrong with groups that are in a certain stage of life, like singles or single
Young moms.
parents. Right? Exactly. Like, yeah, those things are fine. But let's emphasize, and you know what? Something we didn't touch on Sunday. Everybody's worshiping together. On Sunday, we're not separating, and little Johnny's not going to go sit with his friends over there so they can talk about Pokemon or whatever it is that they want to talk about. Because I see it, man. I'm just pointing it out there.
I agree. I just think that the pastorship needs to be very clear to put their energy on the older people who forgot what young kids are supposed to be like, and tell them, hey, that kid's wiggling and squirming because that's what God made kids to do, is wiggle and squirm.
Correct.
And so instead of looking, nasty at that young mom because she can't control that toddler, why don't you get your butt over there and help her out?
Correct.
Yep.
Absolutely.
We don't have a nursery, but we have me, and they all know I'll take their baby. I'll walk around with them, and let's help each other out.
I absolutely love having the whole family in my sanctuary, but I get that moms of 2 and 3 year olds are just like so anxious and can't pay attention because they feel like the whole church hates them. And so the whole church needs to revolve around that young mom and say, listen, we don't think it's on you that kid is not that interested in my exegesis of Romans 6. Okay. That's not your fault. So let's wrap around you. And maybe the older lady who's got Romans 6 memorized, maybe she could take little Johnny out in the garden for a little while so you can listen, because you got to get this. You got to listen to this too.
Yeah.
Right. When we make moms leave with their kid, I know so many moms are like, I haven't heard a sermon in 7 weeks. And it's like, well, then we failed as a church, because this is a community and we're all involved in this thing.
Yeah.
And that's the culture that we need to build, though. That's the culture that I want to be a part of, not the culture that has the cruise ship mentality, but the culture that says, hey, I don't care that Piper's crying, or Judah made a noise, or Leon dropped his ball, or what. We need to circle around them and say, hey, that's okay, don't worry about it, no sweat. And that mom won't feel like everybody hates her. If you do that.
That has to come from the front. That has to come from the identity that the elders are saying, this is who we are at this church. We are not going to change that, because for all of the reasons we just said, that's got to come from the leadership. And that means the leaders have to be interested in a church that looks biblical, not a church that looks like the next biggest church down the street.
Right.
Yeah. And we still have, technically I could go for another 10 minutes. I do want to try to wrap it up, but one thing I love about my church is that they have in the back like a TV where women or even men, right? It doesn't have to be women, but typically it's women, can step out for a second. They can still hear the sermon, but they can take care of their baby's needs while they're there, right? And so they kind of help each other out without interrupting. I love that the women go in there, and some men, and they don't interrupt, because they know, hey, we're still listening. We're still listening to sermons. So I'll take your baby, while you watch mine, because you need a break from yours or whatever, but we're still listening to the sermon. Right. I love that. And what I was referring to earlier is I see sometimes parents allow, let's say, 10-year-old Timmy go sit with his friends. And so what are they doing? They're not listening. And a 10-year-old should be listening. And I'm not saying that, it's easy, but a 10-year-old's almost a 12-year-old. A 12-year-old, basically, biologically a man, or at least a few years away from that. So parents, especially fathers, should be making a conceited effort to say, hey, on Sunday, we sit down as a family, we listen as a family, and when we get home, we're going to discuss as a family. Right? So Nothing wrong with youth groups. Nothing wrong with individual age groups. I wanted to talk about conferences too, because sometimes we have women's conferences and men's conferences. And I would say that's okay too. That's
Yep.
occasional, youth conferences.
As long as it's supplementary, as long as it's a vitamin, not a meal.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, we need to focus on the Lord's Day worship, where we worship as a church, and family worship, where we worship in the home, being led hopefully by a father or a father figure. And if that's not an option, moms sometimes, unfortunately, they have to step up, because this is a fallen world and it's not perfect. But we have to make sure that we're doing family worship. And then everything else, we'll worry about everything else if we can fit it in. And it should be happening organically, naturally, not something that the church is, the church leadership is constantly organizing. Cool. So that's a good summary. I did pretty good, guys.
I think so.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you guys for being here. I love it when we get together and we have these discussions. For everybody watching, thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, God bless.